Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling something I think you're going to find pretty interesting. It's Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, better known as DOGE.
DOGE.
DOGE. You probably see the headlines, Trump, Musk, trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
But we're going to be going beyond the hype to understand what DOGE really means for the U.S. government, and more importantly for you. We've got a whole stack of articles and reports here. And our mission is to sift through all the noise and give you the insights that really matter.
Yeah, it's a story that has definitely captured the public's imagination. You know, in just a matter of weeks, DOGE has gone from this little-known initiative to a force that's really kind of shaking up the very foundations of the federal government.
So let's paint a picture for our listener.
Yeah.
Imagine $2 trillion
Wow.
vanishing from the federal budget.
Yeah.
That's DOGE's goal.
That's a lot of money.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
And it's a figure that's sending shockwaves through every corner of government. So what would be the potential consequences of such a drastic cut?
Well, the impact could be enormous. I mean, we're talking about potential cuts to everything from healthcare and education to infrastructure and scientific research.
Yeah.
You know, supporters of DOGE argue that this is a necessary step to eliminate waste and streamline government operations. But critics worry that such drastic cuts could cripple essential services and harm the most vulnerable members of society.
It's a high-stakes gamble, for sure. And at the center of it all is Elon Musk.
Of course.
I mean, a figure who needs no introduction.
Yeah.
But his role in DOGE goes beyond that of a typical advisor.
Right. President Trump has designated Musk as a special government employee.
Interesting.
Which is a designation that grants him significant authority within the government while exempting him from certain ethical constraints and financial disclosure requirements that apply to traditional government officials.
Okay, so that right there has sparked a lot of debate. You have on one hand those who applaud Musk's entrepreneurial spirit and his willingness to shake things up. But on the other hand, you have critics who worry about potential conflicts of interest, given that his own companies like Tesla and SpaceX have received billions in government contracts.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. And it raises questions about transparency and accountability.
Right.
How can the public be assured that Musk's actions are driven by the public good and not by his own private interests?
It's a question that's on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah.
And then there's the DOGE team itself.
Yeah.
It's not your typical group of Washington insiders.
No, not at all. We're seeing a real blend of tech executives, young engineers, individuals with ties to Musk's ventures, and even some with connections to fringe ideologies. It's a mix that has many questioning whether they really have the necessary experience and qualifications to navigate the complexities of government.
Speaking of unconventional, one article, we have details a 19-year-old DOGE staffer who goes by Big Balls online. Big Balls. This individual apparently had access to sensitive government systems. It's a detail that has many raising eyebrows and asking if DOGE is prioritizing tech savvy over experience and judgment.
It definitely feeds into this narrative of a tech takeover of the government.
Right.
I mean, we're seeing former Tesla engineers and Palantir executives filling key IT roles. It's a shift that has some excited about the potential for innovation and efficiency, but also has others worried about a lack of institutional knowledge and the potential for disruption.
And the pace of change has been nothing short of dizzying.
Absolutely.
We've got a timeline here that reads like a political thriller. Within weeks, DOGE has begun digging into the Treasury Department's payment systems, terminating hundreds of contracts for diversity programs, and even attempting to dismantle entire agencies like USAID.
Yeah, it's an aggressive approach that sent shockwaves through the federal workforce. You know, imagine being a federal employee and suddenly finding yourself in the crosshairs of this whirlwind of change.
Right.
There's a sense of uncertainty and anxiety that's just palpable.
One article describes DOGE's methods as a hostile takeover. DOGE staffers are reportedly parachuting into agencies demanding access to data and implementing changes with little regard for existing protocols or the concerns of career civil servants.
It really does feel like they're coming in and shaking things up without much concern for the people who've been working in these agencies for years.
So this brings us to a crucial question. Is DOGE simply streamlining government, or are they eroding transparency and accountability in the process?
Right.
Critics argue that their opaque operations and disregard for established norms are creating a dangerous precedent.
It's a valid concern. I mean, if they're truly trying to make the government more efficient and effective, they need to be more open about their methods and their goals.
Let's dive into that a bit further. What are some specific examples of this lack of transparency that has critics concerned?
Well, there have been reports of DOGE staffers refusing to provide their full names during interviews with federal employees. almost as if they're trying to avoid accountability.
Wow.
We also have this incident with Marco Alez, the DOGE staffer who resigned after being linked to controversial social media posts. While he later claimed he would return it, raises questions about the vetting process and the types of individuals being brought into DOGE.
It seems like there's a lot of information the DOGE is keeping close to the vest. Their budget, their specific plans, even the full identities of their personnel, it's all shrouded in secrecy.
And that secrecy makes it difficult to assess the true impact of their actions. Are they truly rooting out waste and corruption as they claim, or are they pursuing a hidden agenda? The lack of transparency makes it impossible to know for sure.
So we had this incredibly powerful entity in DOGE led by an unelected billionaire.
Right.
Operating with a broad mandate to reshape the government, all while shrouded in secrecy. What kind of reaction is this generating?
Well, it's safe to say that DOGE is not operating in a vacuum. Their actions are sparking fierce opposition from a variety of groups.
So let's explore those reactions in more detail. First up, we have the federal worker unions.
Right. Federal worker unions are at the forefront of the resistance. They argue that DOGE is violating worker rights and union agreements, pushing through buyouts without proper negotiation, and creating a climate of fear and intimidation within the federal workforce.
So they filed multiple lawsuits challenging DOGE's actions, and they're mobilizing their members to put pressure on lawmakers to rein in DOGE's authority.
Exactly. They're doing everything they can to protect their members and push back against what they see as an assault on the federal workforce.
And they're not alone. Democrats in Congress are also sounding the alarm. They're calling for investigations into DOGE's operations, demanding transparency about their budget and personnel, and raising concerns about the potential for conflicts of interest.
They're holding hearings, issuing subpoenas, and doing everything in their power to shine a light on DOGE's activities.
And then there's the judiciary. Judges across the country are being asked to weigh in on the legality of DOGE's actions, and some are pushing back. One judge actually blocked DOGE from accessing sensitive data in the Treasury Department, citing concerns about privacy and due process.
That was a major setback for DOGE, demonstrating that their authority is not absolute and that they are subject to the rule of law.
It's clear that DOGE is facing significant pushback on multiple fronts, but they're also pushing back against their critics.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah, this is where the story gets really complex, and we start to see the power dynamics at play.
We'll dive into all of that and more in part 2 of our deep dive into DOGE.
Can't wait.
See you then.
Looking forward to it. We've seen pushback from unions, lawmakers, and even the courts, but perhaps the most striking example of resistance comes from within the government itself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, career civil servants, the backbone of the federal workforce, are finding ways to slow down or even obstruct DOGE's initiatives.
So we're not just talking about organized opposition from unions and political opponents. There's a groundswell of resistance coming from the very people DOGE is supposed to be working with. What's driving this internal pushback?
I think it's a combination of factors. You know, there's a sense of loyalty to their agencies, a belief in the importance of the work they do, and a deep skepticism of DOGE's motives and methods.
The article we have describes it as a culture clash between DOGE's Silicon Valley mindset, which emphasizes disruption and rapid change, and the more traditional bureaucratic culture of the federal government.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Career civil servants are used to operating within a system of rules and regulations with checks and balances to ensure accountability and prevent abuse of power. DOGE's approach seems to circumvent those norms, and that's creating friction.
So DOGE is facing resistance on multiple fronts, but they're also pushing ahead with their agenda targeting specific agencies for reform or even elimination. Let's dive into some of those targets, starting with USC, the agency responsible for international humanitarian aid.
USAID is a prime example of DOGE's aggressive approach. They didn't just recommend cuts. They essentially tried to shut the entire agency down. The website went dark, staff were told to stay home, and there was a genuine sense of panic among aid groups around the world who rely on USAID funding.
It's hard to overstate the impact of such a move. USAID is a major player in global development and humanitarian assistance. Its programs reach millions of people around the world. To see it targeted in such a dramatic fashion is definitely raising concerns about DOGE's priorities and their understanding of the complexities of foreign aid.
One of the key arguments DOGE has used to justify targeting USAID is that it's riddled with waste and inefficiency. They've pointed to allegations of misspending and a lack of accountability, but critics argue that DOGE's assessment is flawed and that they're overlooking the vital role USAID plays in advancing U.S. interests and promoting stability around the world.
And then there's the incident with the USAID Inspector General, who was fired after raising concerns about DOGE's access to billions of dollars in humanitarian funds. It certainly adds fuel to the fire for those who are questioning DOGE's motives and whether they're truly committed to transparency and accountability.
Absolutely. The lack of transparency surrounding DOG's actions is a major point of contention. If they're truly trying to root out waste and corruption, why not be more open about their findings and their methods?
Okay, so USAID is sort of a poster child for DOGE's aggressive approach. But they're not stopping there. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, is another agency that's in DOGE's crosshairs.
The CFPB was created after the 2008 financial crisis to protect consumers from predatory lending and other abusive financial practices. It's been a controversial agency since its inception, but it's also very popular with consumers. Musk has publicly suggested shutting it down, arguing that it stifles business growth and innovation.
That's a move that would likely be met with strong opposition from consumer advocates and many Democrats in Congress. They argue that the CFPB plays a vital role in ensuring a fair and transparent financial marketplace, and that weakening or eliminating it would leave consumers vulnerable to exploitation.
It's a classic example of the competing interests at play here. DOGE seems to be prioritizing deregulation and a reduction in government oversight, while critics argue that this approach could harm consumers and undermine financial stability.
And then we have the Department of Education, DOGE, has gained access to sensitive student loan data, which has raised serious privacy concerns. Some Democrats in Congress are even calling for an investigation into how DOGE obtained this data and what they plan to do with it.
It's a move that has many people feeling uneasy. Student loan debt is a major issue for millions of Americans, and the idea of their personal financial information being accessed by an entity like DOGE is understandably alarming.
It speaks to a broader concern about data privacy in the age of big data and algorithmic decision-making. DOGE's tech-driven approach raises questions about who has access to our data, how it's being used, and what safeguards are in place to protect our privacy.
And then there's the Treasury Department. DOGE was initially given broad access to the government's payment systems, which control trillions of dollars in transactions. But after legal challenges from unions and retiree groups, a judge limited their access to read-only data.
So they can look, but they can't touch, at least for now. It's a victory for those who are concerned about DOGE's potential to disrupt critical financial systems. But it also highlights the tension between DOGE's desire for unfettered access to government data and the need for oversight and accountability.
It's a debate that's likely to continue as DOGE expands its reach into other areas of government. They've made it clear that they're not just interested in cutting costs. They want to fundamentally reshape how the government operates, using technology to automate processes, eliminate redundancies, and increase efficiency.
This brings us to the heart of DOGE's agenda, the tech takeover of government. We've seen former Tesla engineers taking charge of technology transformation at agencies like the General Services Administration. There's talk of using AI to review government payments for potential fraud and waste. It's like they're trying to turn the government into a giant tech company.
It's a bold vision, and it's one that has its proponents. They argue that the government is desperately in need of modernization, and that Silicon Valley's expertise in data analytics, AI, and automation can help create a more efficient and effective government.
But critics worry that this approach is too simplistic, that it ignores the complexities of government and the human element that's so essential to public service. They point to the potential for bias in algorithms, the risks of job displacement, and the danger of concentrating too much power in the hands of tech elites.
It's a debate that's not going away anytime soon, and it's one that raises fundamental questions about the role of technology in our lives and the future of work in the age of automation.
And let's not forget that DOGE's targets aren't just institutions, they're also people. We've talked about the buyout offers, but they're also using their influence over hiring and firing to reshape the federal workforce.
One of the executive orders that President Trump signed requires agencies to hire no more than one employee for every 4 that depart, with some exceptions for law enforcement and public safety. This policy, coupled with the buyout offers, is leading to a dramatic downsizing of the federal workforce.
The impact on morale is undeniable. Federal employees are facing a level of uncertainty and anxiety that's unprecedented in recent history. They're worried about their jobs, their livelihoods, and the future of the services they provide to the American people.
It's a situation that's creating a lot of tension and resentment. Career civil servants feel like they're being targeted, that their expertise and experience are being devalued, and that their voices are not being heard.
So DOGE's rationale for all of this is essentially that the government is too big, too inefficient, and riddled with waste and corruption. But is that really a fair assessment?
That's a complex question, and there's no easy answer. There's no doubt that there's some level of waste and inefficiency in any large organization, and the U.S. government is no exception. But critics argue that DOGE is painting with too broad a brush, and that their sweeping cuts are threatening essential programs and services that benefit millions of Americans.
Take USAID, for example. It's not just about handing out money. It's about providing life-saving aid, promoting development, and advancing U.S. interests around the world. Dismantling it could have far-reaching consequences.
Exactly. And the same could be said for the CFPB, the Department of Education, and other agencies DOGE has targeted. These agencies play vital roles in protecting consumers, ensuring access to education, and promoting economic opportunity.
So it's not just about dollars and cents. It's about the role of government in our society, the services it provides, and the values it upholds. And that's where this debate gets really interesting.
It does, because DOGE is essentially forcing us to confront these fundamental questions. What do we want from our government? How much are we willing to spend on it? And how do we balance efficiency with effectiveness, accountability with innovation?
It's a lot to unpack, but it's clear that this is a story that's still unfolding, and the outcome of these battles will have a profound impact on the future of our government. We've covered a lot of ground here, from DOGE's ambitious goals and aggressive tactics to the fierce backlash they're facing. It's clear that this whole initiative is really sparking a national conversation about the role and size of government in the 21st century. But amidst all the controversy, there's one question that keeps coming up again and again. Is DOGE operating within the bounds of acceptable behavior?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that's generating a lot of heated debate. I mean, DOGE supporters argue that they're simply trying to modernize a bloated and inefficient bureaucracy.
Right.
Using technology and innovative approaches to deliver better results for the American people.
But their critics paint a very different picture. They see DOGE as this unelected, unaccountable force that's operating with a dangerous level of secrecy and disregard for established norms.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have these two very different narratives about what DOGE is all about. And depending on which narrative you subscribe to, you're likely to have very different opinions about the legitimacy of their actions.
So let's break down some of the specific concerns that critics have raised. We've talked about the lack of transparency surrounding DOGE's operations. They've been reluctant to disclose their budget, their specific plans, even the full identities of their personnel.
And that secrecy makes it difficult for the public to assess the true impact of their actions.
Right.
Are they really finding those billions of dollars in waste and inefficiency that they promised? Or are they pursuing a hidden agenda that's not in the best interest of the American people?
We also have the issue of conflicts of interest. Elon Musk's companies stand to benefit financially from some of the changes that DOGE is implementing. And that raises legitimate questions about whether he's putting his own interests ahead of the public good.
The White House has defended Musk's role, insisting that he's committed to serving the American people. But the optics are undeniably bad, and it's contributing to a growing sense of distrust among DOGE's critics.
And then there's the way DOGE has treated career civil servants. The buyout offers the hiring, freezes the pressure to leave. It all adds up to a sense that DOGE is trying to dismantle the existing federal workforce and replace it with something entirely new.
And what's particularly concerning is that many of those career civil servants possess decades of experience and institutional knowledge that can't easily be replaced. Their expertise is invaluable, and to see them being treated with such disregard is deeply troubling.
So we have this convergence of concerns. Lack of transparency, conflicts of interest, disregard for career civil servants, and it's creating a perfect storm of controversy around DOGE.
And it's forcing us to confront some fundamental questions about how we want our government to function. Do we want efficiency at all costs? Or are there other values like transparency and accountability that we need to prioritize?
It's a debate that goes to the very heart of our democracy. How do we balance the need for a strong and effective government with the need to protect individual rights and ensure that power is not abused?
These are not easy questions to answer, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution, but it's a conversation that we need to have as a nation. DOGE has brought these issues to the forefront, and it's up to us, the citizens, to decide what kind of government we want for the future.
Well, there you have it. A deep dive into DOGE, one of the most audacious and controversial initiatives in recent American history. It's a story that's still being written, and it will be fascinating to see how it all unfolds.
And as you continue to follow this story, I encourage you to think critically about the information you're consuming. Don't just accept the narratives that are being presented to you. Dig deeper. Ask questions and form your own conclusions about what DOGE means for the future of our government.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into DOGE.
My pleasure.